Hello everyone and welcome to another News Coolum video. And I wanted to talk about EV registration fees to account for road wear, right? Because what we're seeing is a lot of states now are talking about, well, we should be charging a per mile fee for EVs or an additional fee. And all of this is because someone somewhere down the line made the decision to tie road repair fees to gasoline consumption. And, you know, EVs, they can be charged anywhere and completely off the grid. Like nobody knows you're in the back corner of a property somewhere with some solar panels and you're plugging in and charging up your EV. It's truly off grid, right? Off the roster. And so with EVs, nobody knows how many miles you're driving. Nobody knows where you're driving, right? And so it makes it a little bit difficult if you're going to then assess a fee to repair roads, which I do think is important. I just think that those fees, we need to make sure that when those fees are collected by a state, they don't go into a slush fund. They actually go toward repairing roads, which is what they should be earmarked for. Because if you're going to do a tax, it really should be based on the individual's usage. We already have a very regressive tax structure. So limiting what we charge people who can't really afford to pay more or who are very only minimally using the public resource that they're being charged for is the ideal. And so with EVs, though, the counter proposal from doing a fuel tax or a gas tax is, well, up until this point, it's just tack on an additional EV or plug-in hybrid fee onto the license and registration costs, right? It's just an annual fee that gets tacked on and has no relevance in any way other than this is the powertrain of your vehicle. We don't know what to charge you, so we're going to charge you this. That is a very flawed way of approaching it, and it creates a fairness issue both from the perspective of gas car owners who maybe pay more in taxes because they buy more gasoline, right? Maybe they have a particularly inefficient gas car, and so they're paying more than the $100, $200, $300 surcharge that EV owners are paying each year, or they're paying less, and then the EV owners are facing, well, this is, disparate treatment and it's unfair for us. And so the counter proposal to this is, well, let's start having people pay their road taxes rather than a fuel tax. Do instead a per mile tax. And that's basically, we'll check your odometer and we'll charge you based on your odometer. Now, I think there are issues with this from a logistics standpoint. There are some things that could also come out of this too, where it's maybe it has the potential for a little bit of government overreach as well. But at the same time, the U.S. doesn't really do what a lot of other countries do, where they check the roadworthiness of a vehicle. The closest you get in states like California that do it are a smog check, like a biannual smog check, where in order to register your gas-powered car, you have to go in and have a smog done. And they check your emissions and make sure everything is in order. They're not really checking roadworthiness. They are checking, though, emissions. But this odometer reading really does open up a can for maybe also roadworthiness checks. And at that point, again, you're talking about, well, if you bought a $5,000 gas car that's barely running and you're able to, keep it on the road with hopes, prayers, bubble gum, and baling wire, well, then they might just pull that car's registration. So there's that aspect of it too. But to me, I think the bigger issue is just the logistics of it, because how are you going to have millions of people, right, submit their odometer readings? I don't really like the idea of the automaker submitting it, right? I don't like that connectivity aspect of it where, oh, the car will report all of its data to the DMV. No, I really don't like that either. Hello, future Eric here. Sorry to interrupt, but at the time that I was filming this video, I did not realize the extent to which California had kind of gone off the rails in terms of this proposal. I'm going to add a link to I believe it's a Politico article below, but essentially this preliminary plan that California had was actually to track the miles using like almost like a GPS locator. And credit where credit is due. A lot of people pushed back on this, and the state was basically forced to say, "Hey, we were just testing. We just wanted to see." And of course, they are just testing to see what they could get away with. But I think it's important to remember that that is exactly the government overreach that I was referring to. And it is a violation of the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution. Just, you could try to steelman this and say, hey, look, this will verify how many of your miles were driven out of state. This will verify how many of your miles were driven on non-public roads or private roads or whatever. But that's a real stretch. Like once you start getting into the point of the literal government being able to track what your movements are, where you've been, where you've gone, the frequency that you make certain trips, this is all, especially in this day and age, no, not going to happen. And so I think I'm not going to interrupt my old self, the chef, while he was cooking, because I still agree completely with what my proposed solution would be. And well, I'll let myself continue, but yeah. So it turned out to be even worse than I realized at the time. I guess I should have actually read exactly what their proposal was, but this is something that I had recorded probably longer ago than I should have, given when I'm actually publishing it now. But it's still timely, and there's still time to, I think, defer to my more modest proposal about a gross vehicular weight rating and a sliding scale based on the actual road wear. So back to you, older, younger Eric. And if you are going to check mileage, then it ends up being retroactive. And so my personal take on it is there's maybe actually a better and easier and less of a logistical nightmare way of assessing these road taxes. And that's based on vehicle weight. And I know people will push back on this, because they'll say, well, it's not vehicle weight, it's the miles. But really, it's actually more vehicle weight, and then the miles are just sort of a multiplier, if you will. And the reason for that is the way roads are constructed, a lighter passenger vehicle really does result in very little to no wear on the road whatsoever. I mean, you'll see if you have like a garage slab poured for concrete, they'll do the different PSI ratings of concrete, right? And there's more strength in certain versions than in others, right? And the way our roadways are designed, if you're driving around in a light commuter car, 2,000 to 3,000 pounds, maybe 4,000 pounds at most with all of the occupants, the amount of wear that you're going to put on the road is very minimal compared to these commercial trucks that might be driving around with 30, 40,000 pounds, 80,000 pounds, sometimes special, heavy freight, oversized load, special permitting, way more than that, right? And what they found is that just a single trip, right? We're just talking about one pass with one of those heavy overweight vehicles can do more damage than 1,000 passenger cars, light passenger cars. Now, it is an exponential increase, right? So if we're talking about in the EV world, well, a 3,500 pound Chevrolet Bolt EV is not going to be anywhere near as damaging as a 9,500 pound Silverado EV RST, right? And then, of course, we're not counting the fact that that's the vehicle weight, not counting what it's capable of carrying in terms of a total load, right? The gross vehicle weight rating. And if we consider it that way, it would be very easy to just do a sliding scale, eliminate the gas tax, eliminate the surcharge on the EVs, just pull all of these additional special fees to pay for road wear, and then once a year on your registration, you pay on a sliding scale, probably based on the GVWR, the gross vehicle weight rating, and a calculation of how much that impacts the road, and just do a basic calculation. Yes, it's a bit of the honors system, and yes, people who drive 30 to 40 to 50,000 miles a year are, kind of benefiting versus the people who are only driving 10 to 15,000 miles a year. But again, even with that odometer reading, there's no guarantee how many of those miles were driven on public roads, right? I myself do a lot of driving on private roads, do a lot of driving on non-maintained roads. And so you're asking me to pay road maintenance fees on maintained roads when 10, 15, 20% of my driving is on unpaved, unmaintained, or private roads. So if that's the case, right? So if we're talking about fair is fair, the known information that we have, just do a calculation for what the typical driver drives, right? 15,000 miles a year. Commercial drivers would probably have a different calculation. And how much does that vehicle weigh, or what's the heaviest potential cargo capacity that vehicle has, and assess a single annual fee. No muss, no fuss. This is information that is published in order for a vehicle to even be registered for road use. They just do a simple calculation. Maybe for the Bolt EV, it's a $300 registration fee and a $150 a year annual road wear fee. Done. Whereas a Hummer EV, maybe it's their whatever their registration fee is, but then instead of $150, theirs might be $600, might be $800, might be $900 or $1,000, because again, the amount of damage that heavier vehicle is doing is disproportionate. It's going to increase exponentially with the weight. So even though it's 3 times heavier, maybe instead of $450, they pay $900. So it's something that an actuary could work out, right? This is something that mathematically we could just set a scale, and it's also something that the consumer can plan around, right? They can look at that, the Monroney sticker or whatever and say, oh, this vehicle is heavy, and it has a heavy GVWR, and maybe I don't need a truck. Maybe I don't need a 3-row SUV. Maybe I don't need a vehicle that can carry 5,000 pounds in the bed or whatever. Maybe I should consider getting a smaller vehicle. Maybe I should consider getting a vehicle that, has less road wear, and I'm paying less as a result. So that would be my preferred method. And then again, like I said, obviously, if you do this, it should be across the board registrations for every vehicle, not playing favorites with EVs or plug-in hybrids or anything else, but also it gives a huge incentive to the automakers to start focusing not just on more efficient vehicles, but also lighter vehicles, because they'll be then giving their customers an option that costs their customers less money over time. So that would be my preferred way. And like I said, then there's no arguments over fairness. Were the miles that you were driving actually on roadways within the jurisdiction where you live? Were they on private roads? Were they on unmaintained roads? Or were they, what were they, right? There's no arguments of, I took a trip to the Arctic Circle and now I have to pay an extra $1,000 a year for my vehicle because I took a long trip and it wasn't even on maintained roads, right? There's none of those arguments of fairness. And then of course there's no gas or fuel tax either. Just cut that out of the way and then just say, hey, look, you chose to buy a 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 pound car. This is how much you're going to pay a year to make sure that the roads can support a vehicle of that weight, given the typical amount of miles that someone drives in it. So anyway, I'd love to hear what you think. What's your take on it? Are you paying for your road wear and road maintenance fees right now? Is there a special surcharge for your EV, or are you paying out the nose for gas taxes? What do you think of my idea for sort of settling it in an easy, clean, base it on the weight GVWR of the vehicle, and then just move on? As always, thank you for watching.